No one
There you go,
noticed it
little
at
one. You're
first.
doing
Not
great.
the private
So
doctors who
sweet to
came and went
watch.
in spotless
He's a strong
coats.
eater.
Not the nutritionists with their charts and carefully measured formulas. Not even the millionaire father who watched his son through glass walls and security cameras, trusting that money could solve anything. The baby was always quiet, too quiet for a child surrounded by luxury. And every morning, when the nurse recorded his weight, the number dropped again, just a little, but nonstop. The mansion was filled with soft sounds, air conditioners humming, marble floors echoing footsteps, distant phones ringing with business calls worth millions. In the nursery, everything was perfect on the surface. Imported cribs, organic baby food, the best brands money could buy. Yet the baby's cheeks grew thinner, his cries weaker, his tiny fingers curling with less strength each day. The doctor said it was stress, a rare condition, maybe just a phase. Give it time, they said. Time was something the baby didn't seem to have. The father tried not to panic. He was a man used to control, used to fixing problems with signature or a wire transfer. He doubled the medical care, replaced staff, demanded answers. But every night, after the lights dimmed and the house fell silent, he stood at the nursery door, watching his child breathe, wondering how something could be so wrong in a place built to be perfect. And then there was the maid. She wasn't supposed to matter in this story. She wore plain clothes, spoke softly, and moved through the house like a shadow, cleaning spills no one else saw and fixing small messes before they became big ones. She had raised children of her own, though no one ever asked her about that. To most of the staff, she was invisible. But she was the one who spent the longest hours in the nursery, wiping the baby's mouth, humming old songs, watching closely. She noticed things others didn't. The way the baby turned his head away at certain moments. The way his tiny body stiffened after feeding. The faint marks that appeared and disappeared. The way his cries changed depending on who was holding him. At first, she told herself she was imagining it. After all, who was she to question doctors and millionaires? But the numbers kept dropping. The baby kept weakening. One evening, as the sun cast long shadows across the nursery floor, the maid paused mid-step. She watched carefully, her heart starting to race. Something small, almost invisible, happened again, something everyone else had missed for weeks. In that quiet moment, she realized the problem wasn't the baby at all. And if she was right, then the danger wasn't coming from sickness. It was coming from inside the house. The maid didn't say anything that night. She finished her work with steady hands, even though her thoughts were racing. She had learned long ago that in houses like this, speaking too soon could cost you your job, or worse, make people stop listening forever. Instead, she watched. She listened. She remembered every detail, every pattern, every small change in the baby's behavior. The mansion might have been built of stone and glass, but secrets moved through it like air. Her name was Rosa, and she had worked in rich homes most of her life. Each one had its own rules, its own silences. This one was no different. The millionaire trusted systems, schedules, and professionals. Rosa trusted instincts shaped by long nights with sick children and mornings filled with worry. She knew what hunger looked like. She knew what pain sounded like. And what she was seeing didn't match the reports written neatly on clipboards. The next morning, the doctors came again. They spoke in low voices, using careful words like absorption and metabolism. The baby lay still as they examined him, his eyes unfocused, his body lighter than it should have been. Rosa stood near the door, holding a folded blanket, watching how the baby reacted when one particular nurse adjusted his bottle. The baby's lips trembled. His breathing changed. No one else noticed. They were too busy talking. The father arrived late that afternoon, his phone still pressed his ear, his face tight with frustration. He loved his child deeply, but fear made him distant. He asked questions, received polite answers, and nodded as if convinced. Rosa saw the doubt in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. Money had never failed him before. This time, it was slipping through his fingers. That evening, Rosa stayed longer than usual. She wiped down the counters slowly, giving herself an excuse to remain in the nursery. The baby was fed again, carefully measured, carefully timed. Rosa watched closely, her chest tightening as the same thing happened. The baby turned away, gagged slightly, then fell into an uneasy sleep that didn't look like rest at all. Rosa went home that night, carrying the weight of what she suspected. Her small apartment felt colder than usual. She barely slept, replaying moments in her mind. She thought of her own child years ago, how doctors had missed something simple because they were looking too hard in the wrong direction. Back then, she had trusted her voice. This time, she wasn't sure anyone would hear it. Over the next few days, the tension in the house grew thicker. Staff whispered in corners. The father canceled meetings. The baby's weight continued to drop, just enough to keep everyone worried, but not enough to trigger drastic action. Rosa noticed something else too, how certain routines never change, even when others did. How one person always insisted on doing things their way. Rosa knew she was standing at a dangerous line. Speaking up could save a life. Staying silent felt like betrayal. As she stood in the nursery one afternoon, the baby's tiny hand wrapped weakly around her finger, as if holding on. In that moment, Rosa understood that whatever was happening had been allowed to happen, and the longer it went on, the harder it would be to stop. Rosa began to notice how the house itself seemed to take sides. Doors that once stayed open were now gently closed. Conversation stopped when she entered the room. The staff moved carefully, as if everyone sensed something was wrong, but no one wanted to be the first to name it, in a place ruled by wealth and reputation. Mistakes were dangerous, and blame was even worse. The baby remained at the center of it all, quiet, fragile, and slipping further each day. The head nurse insisted everything was under control. She spoke with confidence, reminding everyone of her experience and the strict feeding schedule approved by specialists. Charts were updated, numbers recorded, and reassurances repeated. From the outside, it looked professional. From Rosa's view, something felt rehearsed. The baby's reactions were too consistent, too specific, to be random. Rosa watched the timing, the bottles, the hands that held them. The pattern was becoming clearer, and that scared her more than not knowing. The millionaire father began spending more time in the nursery, though he rarely stayed long. He sat in silence, his expensive suit wrinkling as he leaned forward, watching his child struggle to feed. He trusted the experts, but doubt was eating at him. Late at night, he reviewed reports on his tablet, comparing numbers, searching for answers between the lines. He didn't see Rosa standing quietly nearby, noticing how his eyes lingered on the same unexplained details she had been tracking. Meanwhile, the doctor suggested more tests. They spoke of rare conditions, of patience, of monitoring. Each new explanation pushed the real question further away. Rosa felt trapped between her role and her conscience. She was a maid, not a medical professional. Her voice carried no authority here. Still, the baby responded to her in ways he didn't to others. He calmed when she held him. He fed better when she adjusted small things no one else thought mattered. One afternoon, a young assistant on the staff hesitated before leaving the nursery. She glanced at Rosa, her face tense, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. That look stayed with Rosa long after the girl walked away. It told her she wasn't alone in her doubts. Fear was spreading quietly, hidden behind polite smiles and professional language. The house grew heavier with each passing day. Security cameras watched every hallway, yet the real threat felt invisible. The baby's room, once bright and peaceful, now felt like a place of waiting. Rosa found herself counting breaths, measuring pauses, listening for sound that shouldn't be there. Every feeding felt like a test, every result another warning. Rosa knew that whatever was causing the baby's weight loss wasn't accidental. It was something overlooked, protected by routine and trust. She stood at the edge of a truth that could shake the entire household. And as she looked down at the baby, so small and defenseless, she realized that someone was depending on her to see what others refused to see. The danger was still there, watching, and time was quietly running out. By the end of the week, the mansion no longer felt like a home. It felt like a place holding its breath. The baby's weight check came back lower again, and this time, even the doctors couldn't hide their concern. Their voices dropped, their expressions tightened, and the word urgent began appearing more often. Extra cameras were added to the nursery. Feeding schedules were adjusted once more. Still, nothing changed. Rosa felt the pressure closing in from every side. She noticed how the head nurse never missed a feeding, how she positioned herself just enough to block certain views. She noticed how reports were filed quickly, without room for questions. Most of all, she noticed how the baby's eyes followed Rosa when she entered the room, as if he recognized safety in her presence. That small trust fueled her fear and her determination at the same time. The millionaire father was unraveling quietly. His calls grew shorter. His nights grew longer. He began arriving unannounced, standing in the nursery shadows, watching feedings in silence. Once, Rosa caught him staring at the baby's bottle with a look that suggested suspicion had finally taken root. He didn't say anything, but his eyes met Rosa's for a brief second. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Later that night, Rosa made a decision she knew she couldn't undo. She stayed after her shift, pretending to clean while actually watching. The house was quiet, staff moving less, routines loosening under exhaustion. When the next feeding began, Rosa's heart pounded so loudly she was sure someone could hear it. She focused on every movement, every second, every reaction. The baby stiffened almost immediately. It was subtle, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. But Rosa saw it clearly now. Her hands trembled as she stepped closer, pretending to adjust a blanket. What she saw confirmed her worst fear. This wasn't illness. It wasn't a mystery condition. It was something being repeated, controlled, hidden in plain sight. Before Rosa could act, footsteps echoed in the hallway. The feeding was cut short. Smiles returned. The moment disappeared as if it had never happened. Rosa stepped back, her chest tight, knowing she was now carrying dangerous knowledge. Knowledge that could cost her everything, or save a life. The next morning, tension exploded beneath the surface. The doctors demanded more tests. The father insisted on answers. Staff members avoided eye contact. Rosa noticed the young assistant from before, watching her closely now. Fear and hope mixed in her eyes. Something was about to break. Rosa could feel it. As another feeding approached, the baby cried weakly, his small body exhausted. Rosa stood nearby, closer than ever, her decision already made. She knew that once she spoke up, there would be no turning back. The truth was right there, seconds away from being exposed. And somewhere in the house, someone realized they were running out of time. The feeding was delayed, and that delay changed everything. The head nurse stepped out to take a call. Her voice sharp and hurried as she moved down the hallway. For the first time in days, the routine cracked. Rosa felt it instantly, like a sudden drop in the air. The baby lay restless in the crib, his breathing uneven, his tiny chest rising and falling too fast. Rosa moved closer without thinking, her instincts louder than fear. That was when the young assistant returned, eyes wide, hands shaking. She whispered Rosa's name so softly it barely reached her. "They changed the formula," she said, her voice breaking. "Not the brand. Something else. I saw it days ago, but I was told not to ask questions." Before Rosa could respond, footsteps echoed again, and the assistant stepped back, her face closing like a door. The millionaire father entered the nursery moments later. He looked exhausted, but there was something different in his expression now. Focus, sharp and alert. He watched silently as preparations resumed, his gaze moving from the bottle to the baby, then to the people in the room. Rosa felt her heart pound. He was seeing it now, too. Or at least he was close. As the feeding began, the baby reacted faster than ever, his body tense, his small hands curling tight. Rosa stepped forward instinctively, her voice catching in her throat. "Stop," she said, barely louder than a breath. The room froze. Every eye turned to her. For a second, no one moved. The head nurse returned just in time to hear Rosa's word. Her face hardened, her tone calm but sharp as she took control again. "Everything is fine," she said, too quickly. She reached for the bottle, blocking Rosa's view. The baby's cry weakened, turning into a thin sound that cut through the room. The father's jaw tightened. He raised his hand, stopping the feeding himself. Silence fell heavy and dangerous. But before anyone could speak, an alert sounded from the hallway. A doctor had reviewed the latest test results and found something unusual. something that didn't match any diagnosis they had given before. The timing was too perfect. Rosa felt a chill run through her. Someone had been careful. Someone had planned this. The father demanded answers, his voice low but shaking with controlled anger. The head nurse deflected, citing protocols, mistakes, misunderstandings. Rosa watched the assistant in the corner, tears slipping down her face. This wasn't just about one baby anymore. It was about trust, about power, about how easily a life could be overlooked when everyone assumed the system worked. Later that night, Rosa overheard a phone call she wasn't meant to hear. A quiet voice, a warning, words like exposure, and too close floated to the dark hallway. Her stomach dropped. Whatever was happening inside the mansion was bigger than she had imagined, and now she was part of it. As Rosa returned to the nursery, she found the baby awake, staring at her with tired eyes. She placed her finger in his tiny hand, feeling his weak grip tighten just enough to remind her why she couldn't walk away. Somewhere nearby, plans were shifting, stories were being rewritten, and the most dangerous truth of all was still waiting to be revealed. The confrontation came quietly, not with shouting, but with truth laid bare. The millionaire father ordered everyone out of the nursery except the doctors, Rosa, and the head nurse. His voice was calm, but the room felt like it was cracking under the weight of it. He demanded the bottle be tested again. Right there, no delays, no excuses. When the results came back, the silence said everything before the words did. The formula had been altered in a way that prevented the baby's body from absorbing nutrients. Slowly, carefully, enough to weaken him without setting off alarms. The head nurse tried to speak, but the father stopped her with a raised hand. Rosa stood frozen, her heart pounding as the truth finally surfaced. The nurse confessed then, not out of guilt, but because there was nowhere left to hide. She had been paid to keep the baby fragile. A hidden agreement, a long game. The plan was never to cause sudden harm, only to keep the child weak enough to trigger a legal shift in control of the family fortune. The words sounded unreal, but the evidence was undeniable. Security stepped in. The doctors moved quickly, changing the feeding plan, adjusting care with urgency that had been missing before. Rosa watched as the baby took a feeding, without reacting the way he always had. His body relaxed for the first time. It wasn't a miracle, but it was hope, real, fragile hope. The father sank into a chair, his hands shaking as the weight of it all hit him. He had trusted systems. He had trusted titles. And he had almost lost everything that mattered. He looked at Rosa then, truly seeing her for the first time, not as staff, not as background, but as the person who saved his child. The police took the head nurse away quietly. No dramatic scene, just handcuffs and lowered eyes. The house felt different almost immediately, as if it could finally breathe. The assistant broke down in tears, relieved the secret was out. Doctor stayed late into the night, monitoring every small change. The baby slept deeper than he had in weeks. But just when it felt over, one final truth surfaced. The altered formula hadn't been prepared inside the mansion. It came sealed, approved, signed off through official channels. The nurse hadn't acted alone. She had help from someone higher up, someone who had access to suppliers and approvals. Someone still out there. The father read the report in silence, his face darkening as he realized the danger wasn't completely gone. Rosa stood beside the crib, watching the baby breathe steadily. She felt relief, but also a quiet fear. The main threat had been stopped, but the story wasn't finished. Not yet. Power left shadows behind, and shadows didn't disappear easily. As dawn broke over the mansion, the baby stirred, letting out a small, stronger cry. Rosa smiled through tears. Whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain. Seeing the truth had saved a life, and keeping it safe would be the next battle. The days that followed were careful and quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm. The baby began to gain weight slowly, not all at once, but enough to make the doctors exchange hopeful looks. His cries grew stronger, his eyes more alert. Every small improvement felt like a victory earned the hard way. The feeding routine changed completely, now watched closely by people who no longer trusted titles alone. Trust, once broken, had to be rebuilt with proof. The investigation moved beyond the mansion. Suppliers were questioned. Paper trails were followed. It didn't take long to uncover who had helped approve the altered formula. A distant relative, hidden behind legal layers and corporate influence, had tried to move pieces quietly, believing no one would notice the slow damage. That belief was their mistake. The truth, once exposed, traveled faster than money ever could. Arrests were made. Charges followed. The system that failed the baby was forced to answer for itself. The millionaire father changed too. He canceled meetings without apology. He sat in the nursery more often, holding his child instead of watching from a distance. For the first time, he understood that being present mattered more than being powerful. He apologized to Rosa one evening, not with grand words, but with sincerity. He thanked her for seeing what others ignored, for speaking when silence would have been easier. Rosa didn't expect anything in return. Still, her life shifted. She was offered a new role in the house, one that came with respect and a voice. More importantly, she was trusted. The young assistant stayed on as well, no longer afraid to speak up. The mansion became a different place, less polished, more human. People asked questions now. People listened. The baby grew healthier with each passing week. His cheeks filled out, his laughter returned, and the shadow that once hung over the nursery finally lifted. Doctors confirmed what Rosa had known all along. The child had never been sick. He had been surrounded by the wrong kind of care. Once that changed, his body did what it was meant to do. One afternoon, as sunlight poured into the nursery, Rosa watched the baby grip his father's finger with surprising strength. The father laughed softly, a sound that felt new and honest. Rosa felt a deep sense of peace settle in her chest. The danger was gone. The truth had won. Before leaving that evening, Rosa paused at the nursery door. She looked back at the baby, safe and thriving, and thought about how close everything had come to falling apart. All because no one wanted to question what looked perfect on the surface. Sometimes, the smallest voice sees the biggest truth. Sometimes, the person everyone overlooks is the one who saves a life. The story of a millionaire baby wasn't just about wealth or power. It was about attention, about courage, about caring enough to notice when something is wrong. As Rosa stepped out into the evening air, she knew one thing would stay with her forever. Seeing clearly can change everything.